Repeat the process in the other side. We have now the two parts of the front which are going to be overlapping to create the placket. I'm also attaching the interfacing on the facing of the sleeves. On the collar part, you're going to have two sides of this one. You're going to attach the interface in only one side. On the collar part, you're going to have two sides of this one. You're going to attach the interface in only one side. You do the same in the other part of the collar. Your collar is done. I'm going to start stitching the placket on the edge of the fabric. I have stitched both sides of the plackets. Now I will do the darts front and the darts on the back. You have aligned the darts, the markings, and then you stitch all the way into the end. I have done the darts on the front, back. Now we're going to stitch the front and the back on the shoulder seam. Attach the shoulder. We have attached front and back at the shoulder seam. We're going to do a finishing, that's the proper finishing for shirts. For this, you need to trim the excess of fabric only on the back. Leaving around 0.5 centimeters. You do it on both sides. We have trimmed the excess of fabric at the back shoulder. You then press it, going towards the front, both sides. Then you fold it half of it. Do it on both sides. And then you fold again. You can see that I have folded towards the back. You then do a little stitch around this line. With your right side up, you then over stitch it, the line. Using the machine foot as a guide, you then do the second stitch on the shoulder. We have 2 stitches on the shoulder, and you can see on the reverse side it's going to look like this. For the up part of the collar, you will stitch from A to B, which you're going to stitch around this line following the interfacing. Do not stitch around here. Stitch following the line on the interfacing. When you get to the corner, leave your needle where it is, then lift the presser foot and carry on stitching. Trim the excess of fabric all the way around Just be careful not to trim too much, otherwise the fabric can fray. Press the collar. I have folded the collar in half. Then I will do a little pattern notch here on the middle, very tiny, and I will do the same here. This is the part I have attached the interfacing to. What you need to do, I'm going to turn it around, find the part you have attached the collar interface and join the bits. You're going to make like a sandwich, and you do the same here. The way that the collar is going to be inside those two parts here. You now stitch from here to here, following the interface. Then trim the edges, especially around the curved line. Turn it inside out, then press it, especially around the edge on the corner. Both sides. Using the interfacing as the guidance, you will fold this part here. Then you press it. And make sure you fold the same way on this side too. Once you finish pressing, you will have something like this. Using the long length stitch 5, you do a stay stitch around this line, the neckline. We have done a stitch around the neckline. You then going to pull the thread even so slightly. Using the tape measure, measure from the beginning of the placket to the stitch line. This is 13, so the other side will also be 13. Then you mark on your collar using a pencil. As you can see, I have marked here 13. The same way on the other side, you also mark 13. With the interfacing side to the outside of the garment, you make a stitch. Do like this around the line that you have the interfacing. I have marked the places where the seam's gonna meet. Here's the middle back, the stitch on the shoulder, the other side of the stitch on the shoulder. I also marked where the stitch will be on the end of the collar. Using the right side of the garment, the right side of the collar, the one that you have attached the interfacing, you do like a little sandwich again, but then pin it first and make a little stitch from here to here, the same length as the placket. stitch around the line using the interfacing as a reference. You're going to do the same on the other side. Trim the excess of fabric just around here. The same way on the other side. You then gonna pull it over here in a way that the plaque's gonna be between both sides of the collar. With the placket between both parts of the collar, it's a bit fiddly, but you eventually get there. Then you pin it and do a second stitch just on top of that first stitch you did. Making sure you get both fabrics equally. Pulling the other part of the collar towards the back, then you're gonna have wrong side with the right side, and the placket again is gonna be between the collars. Pin it, and do a straight stitch like you did before, following the same line of the previous stitch. Trim the rest of the excess of the fabric like this. Then you turn it inside out. We have finished both parts of the end of the collar. You then locate the middle back, which I already did doing some markings as you'd see previously. You then place your pins again, and once more. Putting the bottom part of the top between the two sides of the collar. Pin it again. To make sure both sides are distributed equally, I will do a hand stitch just to keep things in place. It's easier than you manipulate it with pins. I have done a hand stitch around the neckline on both sides, attaching the both sides of the collar, the bottom part of the top, with this stitch. You're gonna do very close to the edge, but then you have to be careful to catch both sides of the collar. You don't need to stitch around here as it's going to have a lot of fabric and give a better finish if you start from where the plackets finish. Go slowly. I have finished this step now. You can see how it looks on both sides. Then you just need to remove your hand stitch. That can be done at the end. With the steps we just shown, you have done the shoulder seams, attached the collars and on the darts. The next steps will be attaching the sleeves, the skirt, zips, buttons, buttonholes and hemming. We have finished the top part of the dress with the collar, plackets and the darts. We now want to add the sleeves. This part we have cut it 4 times, as you can see, and you do a little pick here and here. This way you're going to do a gathering stitch. Take 2 parts of the sleeves with the right sides together. You're going to have a stitch here. Once you have finished stitching on the edge of the sleeve, you will end up with 2 parts like this. You then press. Once you have finished stitching on the edge of the sleeve, you will end up with 2 parts like this. You then press. We have trimmed the excess, so now we just press it. I know ironing is not the most exciting activity, but it's very important to have a better finishes on the garments. So make sure your iron is so hot and turned on. We're now adding a gathering stitch from this to this with the longest stitch on your machine. Then pull the thread until it reaches a shape like this. We have finished the sleeves. We're going to attach it to the garment now. Remember, the garment middle of the shoulder is always going to be 1.5 centimeters after the shoulder stitch. You do a little pick, then you attach the sleeves with the longest stitch. With the longest stitch, you attach the sleeves very close to the edge, because later we're going to add the facing on the sleeves. Notice that we have both sleeves attached and the space between the back and the front are the same. We attach now the facings. Remember, on the left side, it's where you're going to put the zip. You leave a little space without stitching, which is about 1.5 centimeters from both sides, front and back. This is the left side. Put the facing like this. Remember, will be the side where we leave a little space for the zip. The left side, we start with 1.5 centimeters from the edge, but on the right side, we're going to start from the beginning, like here. And you stitch all the way around it with 1 centimeter, the seam allowance. Remember, you don't need to do overlocking or any finishing here because we have like few layers of fabric, and if you add anything here, it's going to create extra bulkiness that you don't need on your garment. With your face and sleeves is attached, you need to do little picks on the garment like this. Be careful to not cut the thread. This will enable you to move more freely on both sides, front and back. You then press it again. For the back part of the skirt, we have two parts. Don't that way, because then we save a bit of fabric. Otherwise, you need an extra 50 centimeters to make the skirt both ways. You then stitch it with 1.5 centimeters. You have done a stitch here. I will now finish it with an overlock. I will do the overlock close to the edge, cutting a bit of the excess fabric. If you don't have an overlocker, you can do it on your zigzag or some of the overcasting stitches. For short types of garments for women, the right side always going towards on top of the left side. For men is the opposite, the left goes on top of the right. Pin it down. We're going to attach the skirt part on the front of the dress. Pin it. Stitch the skirt front to the top front using 1 centimeter of seam allowance. Stitch the skirt front to the top front using 1 centimeter of seam allowance. You will do the same thing on the back. Identify the mid of the back, and that seam will match the mid of the back. pin it and stitch it. We have attached the skirt to the front and back. We then do the bit of finishing with either your overlocker or your zigzag machine, just to trim the excess fabric and give a better finish to the garments. You do that on both sides. We then stitch the right side, front and back. Leave the left side open. We're gonna do that separately. Make sure the seams are together. Pin it. To avoid any bulkiness around the arm area, I have trimmed the edge here. You then start stitching from the facing down to the bottom of the dress. I have trimmed the edge of the facing on the right side and stitch it all the way around to the bottom. On the left side, however, you're not going to do that just yet. Because the fabric's cut slightly on the diagonal here, you need to make sure when you put the zip on the side, it won't stretch up. So you cut a bit of interfacing, like that. And you will add that from the waistline. This one is about 30 centimeters long, to the side, on both sides, front and back. We have attached the interfacing on the front and back of the left side. We now do an overlock stitch on the edge separately. You can also do a zigzag in case you don't have an overlocker. And on the right side, you overlock it together. You do another little pick here and start overlocking from that pick. As previously mentioned, you will overlock the left side separately. From the bottom until the end. Both sides. Normally you put a zip 25 centimeters below the waistline, so you don't count here. 25 below the waistline. Make sure you're matching the waistline seams. Pin it. Mark 25 as I already did here, and then you're going to stitch from here to the bottom of the skirt with 1.5 centimeters from the edge of the fabric. Goes the skirt. In a previous tutorial, I have shown how to attach an invisible zip. I'm going to be using a different technique now. This zip is slightly longer than I needed, but don't worry, I'm going to cut it in the end and do a bit of finishing. We have changed the machine foot for invisible zip foot. Make sure that little plastic transparent bed will match close to where you stop stitching on between the facing and the fabric. Place your zip under the machine foot. Do a little stitch. Go back. Make sure the stitch is in place. And then pulling the fabric and the zip is slightly, don't overdo it, but if you don't do it at all, the fabric is going to do a bit of gathering and the finish is not going to look good. Then you stitch all the way down. Remember, we have a little stitch here, going to stitch close to the edge. Close your zip. And with your zip closed, you mark exactly where the waist line, the waist stitches are meeting. I normally do that either with a little pick or with a pencil. It's easy to do it with a pencil, which is kind of make it more visible for you. Then you know this bit here will meet exactly on the waistline. Then we start stitching from the bottom up. Then you open your zip again and you open it just below where that stitch is. Place it under your machine foot. Make sure it's going right there. We have placed a pin here on the waist seam. We have placed the zip under the machine foot, and then we start stitching. Remember to pull the zip and the fabric even so slightly. Then carry on until the finish. When you close the zip, now you see they are matching on the waistline. We need again to press the fabric. Press it open like this. We have a big excess of zip here, but don't worry, we're gonna cut it and do a little end with a gross grain ribbon. Cut that. And press it. I have cut 5 centimeters of a gross grain ribbon. That's optional. You then fold it in half. Have fold the gross grain ribbon in half. Then you fold again. And fold again. Make sure the size, the same size, both ends. And you're going to create a little case for the end of the zip like that. Trim the edge of the gross grain ribbon. You then insert the zip between the both sides. And use a normal machine foot, just a stitch. You have a better finishing for when your zip is too long. Remember, I use a different technique doing the zip, but if you feel more comfortable, you can do a hand stitch before you insert the zip to make sure the stitch lines on the waistline will match. The right side of the facing on the sleeve is closed. So you now overlock. All the way around. Remember that the left side of the dress, the facing is open, so you overlock it open. do it all the way. We now insert the facing, attach it to the zip and the garment with a stitch. Then you turn around. Then it's finished one side. Do the same on the other side. Trim the excess of fabric. Turn it around. Turn your dress inside out. Close your zip. See, that's matching. And attach your facings on just with a little stitch on the shoulder. In a previous tutorial, I have shown how to do a round hem on the circular skirt. I will do the same again and show you how to do it. You put your stitch on the 5, which is the longest stitch you can have, and you're gonna sew around the edge of the fabric. All the way around the edge. We have stitched around the whole edge of the fabric. Then you start pulling the thread slightly all the way to create an effect like this. You can see that the hem is automatically turning. You do this all the way around. We have pulled the thread all the way around the skirt. We just now need to adjust. You do it slightly while you turn the edge inside and pressing it at the same time. As you can see here, we have done the folding and the pressing of the hem all around. We now will do a blind stitch, which normally you can do on your domestic machine if they have a range of stitches. To do a blind hem stitch, you need a blind hem foot, and you need to select the blind hem stitch on your machine. I will adjust the settings here so the stitch length is a bit longer and the space between stitches a bit wider. With your adjustments in place, you get the fabric that it is here, then you do one more fold. What will happen here, the machine will stitch straight, 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 zigzag, straight, 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 zigzag. And you will do that all the way around the skirt. You need to do this all the way around your skirt. Once you finish doing this stitch all the way around, it's gonna look like this on the front of the garment. We have finished the hemming around the skirt. Now we're gonna do the buttons. As the placket is 3 centimeters wide, the middle of it will be 1.5. So you need to find the middle, 1.5. Then you find how they space in between the buttons you want. I want the buttons with 8.5 centimeters. So starting from the point, you're gonna have the first button here. Then I measure 8.5 from there and then find the middle of the garment. 8.5 is going to be here. Then 8.5 from there. 8.5 from there. And 8.5 from there. With your buttonhole attachment foot, insert it on your machine. I have select the stitch I want, the way I want the buttonhole to be like, and placed my button there, which the machine is going to automatically calculate how big the buttonhole will be. I have selected the stitch I want from my machine so I can make the buttonholes. Then you place the garment there on the markings you did, making sure it's on the middle. And then you start stitching. This is the buttonhole finished. To open it, you will insert a pin like this. This so you can avoid an accident, because sometimes when you insert the seam ripper, it can rip all over there. So you don't want that to happen. So you insert it. Then you cut. Make the space for your button. We have add the buttons and we finish the dress. We have now finished our dress. This is what the plackets and the buttons look like, the collar. The stitch we did on the shoulder. Cap sleeves, the concealed zip on the side, and the hem.